With the upcoming theatrical release of Supergirl, we are set to have another female-led superhero film back on the big screen. And this film looks good. Now, I believe it's going to be based on the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow story, which is sort of agreed on by many to be a character study on Supergirl. If you haven't read that series, I'd give it a read. Now, it's a bit wordy at times, which makes sense, as it is essentially a existential crisis with ideas of morality wrapped throughout. It kind of gives John Wick but Supergirl. Now, Supergirl is one of the most anticipated movies of the year, and I have high hopes that it'll be good. But what about the bad ones? Now, I am someone who believes that even some of those are still pretty good. I'm talking about vampire women with swords like Ultraviolet or Underworld. I'm talking a British archaeologist with a French braid like Lara Croft Tomb Raider. I'm talking about Aeon Flux. I know, the 2005 film was a flop domestically, but that DVD went triple platinum in my combination VHS DVD player. The wardrobe, the actors, the music, it was all so cunt. Now, this film is highly regarded as one of the worst film adaptations of all time, but I don't know that I fully agree with that. Before we start, as always, I am not an expert. This is just my opinion. You don't have to agree. Now, I also know that this movie was not a masterpiece, and no one is saying it is. I am merely highlighting the things that I really enjoyed about it. Grab your snacks and some water, and let's get into it. Now, Charlize Theron plays a rebel fighter in a short black bob wearing the cuntiest outfits you've ever seen on a woman, jumping and flipping around through a futuristic world where she must essentially overthrow a technocratic dictator and his regime. It had amazing locations, great fight sequences, and good performances from the pretty solid cast. But the weakly fortified story, drastic differences from the source material, and heavy edits and recuts done by the studio all sent this film on a one-way trip to Flopsville, USA. But let's back up a bit. Now, I was someone who was lucky enough to have cable as a kid, and I loved MTV. Not just for the music, not just for the music videos, not just for the talk shows, but for the television programming. Now, MTV had insane TV shows from early in the morning all the way into the late night. Now, I personally remember watching Undressed, a show set in LA following the lives and relationships of regular folk. Now, this was a cool show because sometimes it was high schoolers, sometimes it was stories about college students, and sometimes it was 20-somethings. Now, each season had several reoccurring characters, with each episode focused on 2 or 3 specific characters within interwoven vignettes, meaning that all the characters kind of knew each other or were connected to someone who knew someone. Now, some stories ended when the season did, while others continued to different degrees. So, like if there were a cluster of episodes with a main character and their story wrapped up at the end of the season, you would likely see them as a supporting or minor guest in another person's story later. It was kind of interesting. It really kind of made you feel like you were a fly on the wall in all of these different people's interwoven lives. And at the time that it was on TV, from 1992 to 2002, it was controversial as hell. And truth be told, kind of ahead of its time. Now, the series and most of the other series on MTV at the time were controversial, were their frank discussions about everything. More notably, it was actually diverse. It looked like real life. Like, the shows on network TV weren't even doing that at that time. Also, there was hella queer representation. Now, there was gay mess, there was lesbian mess, and there was even bisexual mess. And it was all reflective of the times, of course. You can get an idea of the culture at that time, illustrated here by a clip where a young Pedro Pascal plays a messy gay man.
Okay, then he's bi, which is just as bad.
Please. Either you're gay or you're not. Period.
Then what do you call a guy who sleeps with both men and women?
Gay. With a weird fetish.
That's crazy. But let's focus on the fact that this is even being talked about as realistic and overtly as it is here. And every character in this episode is gay, by the way. Well, except for the bisexual boyfriend. There will be no bisexual erasure on this channel. I mean, the live programming was terrific. Now, within that late night programming block would also be a handful of MTV's original cartoon series. I was sneaking and watching MTV late at night in the early 2000s, so I was also getting the 90s reruns. I was watching Beavis and Butthead, I was watching Daria, and I was watching Aeon Flux. Aeon Flux is a dark sci-fi cyberpunk cartoon created by Peter Chung, a Korean-American animator best known at the time for his animation style, a style he also used on Rugrats.
I was feeling very frustrated about having characters that were very limited in what they could do and things that they could say. And I think that probably Aeon Flux came out of my frustration of working with babies and very squat characters who were very clumsy. And I wanted to do something that was just the complete opposite of that.
Aeon Flux aired on MTV in various forms. The series first premiered in 1991 on MTV's Liquid television animation show as a 6-part serial. Now, when I first saw Aeon, the world, the surrealist animation, the fetish and BDSM play, the original music, it felt like a pirate broadcast from another dimension. And maybe it was a little too spicy for me, a child at the time, to be watching. Now, altogether, Aeon Flux has a total of 16 episodes spread over 3 seasons that were produced from September 1991 to October 1995. Now, I remember being glued to the television whenever the show was on. I was obsessed, and everyone in my life knew it. My best friend actually gifted me the entire series on DVD one day. He was at a random video store, saw it, picked it up, and then saved it for me for my birthday. Now, what exactly is Aeon Flux about? Well,
it's kind of funny working in Hollywood. Things tend to get polarized into either being pure escapism or something didactic. And I'm really not interested in doing either one of those. I'm really interested in getting the viewer to shift his mind into thinking in a new way. And that's really what these shows is about. I don't have a specific message that, I'm hoping that each viewer gets out of the whole series. It's really up to them what they want to take away from it.
now there isn't much of a connection from episode to episode because Aeon dies at the end of most episodes.
I wanted her to die at the end of the pilot just because I thought it would be a subversive thing to do. And the point of the pilot episode was to show how futile her whole mission was to begin with. And not only did she die, but she actually fails to accomplish anything really.
But what it's most clear about is centering the love-hate relationship between Aeon and Trevor Goodchild. Now, Trevor Goodchild is a technocrat dictator who rules over Brynja, believing that he provides his citizens with a fulfilling and happy life, providing for their every need. Now, in reality, he runs his country as a dystopian military state, using surveillance and his personal army to carry out his every obsessive whim. Aeon, however, is a spy and assassin from neighboring Monica. It's unclear whether she works for the government or a private group, but she acts as an independent agency to keep an eye on Trevor and thwart his crazy plans. Now, although we don't get to see much of it, Monica is said to be a free state, and the residents of Brynja often try to escape there as refugees to live a better life. Now, often classified as neighboring city-states, Trevor Goodchild's Brynja is depicted as lush, technologically advanced, clean, and safe. But the people there aren't really free, they're living in a surveillance state, like to the max. And Aeon, however, lives in Monica, depicted as rough around the edges, not as fancy or technologically advanced, and not very safe, but everyone there is free to come and go, unwatched, unsurveilled. Now, throughout the series, Aeon engages in a series of missions, often involving espionage, sabotage, and assassination, while also navigating a complex and often sexual relationship with Trevor Goodchild and her fellow agent and lover, Sithandra, so she's a chaotic bisexual. Now, Aeon and Trevor are two sides of the same coin. Aeon wants to liberate while Trevor wants to subjugate, and they both embody the height of intelligence, physical strength, and strength of will. Their morality is grounded in the human ideal, and because it is based on their own personal ideas of right and wrong and the means necessary to accomplish these goals, they are often in constant conflict with one another. Both Trevor and Aeon float through morality gray areas often. Now, more than its captivating style, bizarre plot lines, and at times softcore BDSM elements, Aeon Flux on its surface may seem random and pointless, but that's on purpose. Let me explain. One of the short episodes shows Aeon moving through loads and loads of masked soldiers, all of whom are protecting Trevor Goodchild from being assassinated. But as soon as Aeon gets close to killing him, she slips on a nail and falls to her death. illustrating that the egregious showcase of violence was in service of nothing. Now, the subsequent full-length episodes explore many philosophical and moral issues. The actions of the characters raise many more questions about these issues, but like good art, very few answers are given. It's up to us, the viewer, to come to our own conclusions. For example, the episode The Purge delves into the concept of morality itself, and whether or not free will is an essential component to moral behavior. And although you want there to be a deeper backstory, one is never provided. It drops you into this world and makes you question its reality and the morality of the main characters who exist in it. It's subversive, it's surreal, it's full of depth, and more importantly, it has something to say. And, fun fact,
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
That which does not kill us makes us stranger.
honestly, there are so many more quotable parables from this series. I would strongly suggest a watch. Now, at the time of the recording of this video, Aeon Flux is streaming on Paramount Plus in the US. And this show rightfully became a cult classic. And when MTV Films / Paramount Pictures started looking for a way to milk the success of their previous decade of programming, a film adaptation of Aeon Flux was the obvious choice. I honestly don't know why they didn't make a Daria film. It probably would have played better. Everyone was hyped for this film adaptation, myself included. So what happened? Now, before we go into the production and the plot and the reception, we got to talk about mainstreaming. Now, mainstreaming is when specialized niche or avant-garde art is produced and distributed and sometimes redesigned for mass appeal. Mainstreaming in the film medium just takes something niche and tries to Frankenstein it so it appeals to the wide audience mainstream studios have access to, the majority of which are not even familiar with the source material. And this, I think, is the biggest issue with mainstreaming, right? Like, how do you keep the different audiences happy? You'll have the audience who are fans of the source material looking to see their favorite property adapted into film, right? How close will it be to the source material? And you have the newcomers who might be along for the wild ride, no matter how crazy or unfamiliar, or they may just want a straightforward formulaic movie. You can't satisfy them all, right? The cult status of the source material is also called into question with mainstreaming, right? When the sacred text becomes something that then is widely appreciated and consumed by the mainstream, the small cult to which they belong to is no longer that of a small niche group that defines itself as distinct from the cultural mainstream. Anyone who is a fan of the show can tell you this belongs in the animation style. The distinct style of the animation and aesthetic is the show. I don't even think presently there'd be a way to translate that to film, but Paramount still tried. Now, Japanese-American director Karen Kusuma, coming fresh off the success of her first feature film Girl Fight, winning both the Grand Jury Prize and Director's Prize at Sundance, was hired to direct. Screenwriters Philip Hay and Matt Manfredi penned the script that was sent directly to Kusuma by her agent at the time, directly from Paramount. Now, Paramount initially intended for Aeon Flux to be a trilogy, not too unlike The Matrix. And as such, Kusuma was sure Paramount wouldn't hire her, as she was a newbie and a woman. And at the time, the only two women who had directed big-budget action films were Catherine Bigelow with Point Break and Mimi Leder with Deep Impact. But Kusuma decided to just take the meeting and go through the motions. But Kusuma's motions included creating a presentation with storyboards and potential visual cues, which, unbeknownst to her, had put her way ahead of any other directors in the running. The studio heads were really impressed that she was actually prepared, which is crazy because, like, does that mean that all these other dudes are not prepared? Like, what, are they just coming in with, like, vibes? Now, Paramount executive at the time, Sherry Lansing, reportedly had Kusuma's back and was generally supportive throughout the year-long pre-production process. And the idea that they settled on would have seen the film as, quote, something that could stand next to a crouching tiger, hidden dragon, end quote. Okay. Now, Charlize Theron, fresh off her incredible performance as Eileen Wuornos, the first female serial killer in 2003's critically acclaimed film Monster, was set to star as Aeon. Charlize, like most actors who take roles, had never even seen the cartoon the film was to be based on, remarking that she took the gig because she loved Kusuma's Girl Fight, and she really respected her as a character, you know, just girls supporting girls. Production was originally meant to take place in Brasilia, Brazil, known for its futuristic modernist architecture, which Kusuma thought would perfectly match the city-state of Brnya. The producers on the film rejected this idea because Brasilia at the time didn't have the infrastructure to support a large-scale film crew, as the film industry and qualified workforce at that time was heavily concentrated in Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. Kasuma eventually settled on Berlin and Potsdam, Germany. She even got permission to film in places that had never even been filmed before. Now, filming started in Germany in September 2004, and just 10 days in, Charlize suffered a neck injury that shut down production for a month. She was hospitalized for like 10 days and then required to go to about like 6 weeks of physiotherapy to recover. Now, Charlize later in a 2017 interview would reveal that if that accident was just a centimeter off, she would have been paralyzed for life. That's so crazy. That's crazy. Other than that, production was a breeze. Now, everyone was engaged and enjoyed their time on set under the direction of Kasuma. But when it came time to take the footage back to Paramount, something big had happened. Sherry Lansing, who was very supportive of Kasuma and the film, left Paramount, and new heads Brad Gray and Gil Berman had replaced her. In the film industry, when new studio heads are appointed, they often try to heavily edit and make their mark on the previous management's projects. Sometimes they try to take it down altogether, and oftentimes it's personal and petty. What was originally pitched as a thoughtful, highbrow science fiction film, the new studio head saw as a $50 million art movie. They removed Kasuma from the editing process, and she had to sit and watch them cut and shape the film into something that they believed would sell better, mainstreaming to the max. Now, Kasuma would later say, quote, "I felt like I was having like open heart surgery without the painkillers," end quote. When the studio removes a director, it's usually due to creative differences, their temperament, and or their treatment of the cast and crew. But Kasuma was on budget and on schedule and was a darling on set. Now, Kasuma had a sneaking suspicion that her gender played a part in the decision of the studio heads, and I can see why. They dismantled nearly every choice that she and the screenwriters had made. The emotional core of the story and of Aeon was always being questioned as sentimental and over-romantic. And huge segments of the story that gave the movie the emotional weight that it needed were completely removed. And the action scenes, originally filmed as long, deliberate takes, were cut into a jumbled mess. And more egregiously, the sexuality of a gay supporting character was removed completely. Now, there's no word on who the character was, but there are speculations that it was an uncredited translator or even Sathandra. And if that wasn't bad enough, the studio had cut the film down to a short 71 minutes before calling Kasuma back in and asking her to recut it back into something that made sense. Allegedly, before she went back to work, she was told by an exec at the time that they for sure hated her version, but hated the edited version even more. During her editing time, she was essentially babysat by someone from the studio the entire time to make sure that she didn't restore the film to that version. That is so nasty. Now, the original score was supposed to be done by Teddy Shapiro, who had gone on to do the score for films like The Devil Wears Prada and television shows like Severance. But the studio rejected him for unknown reasons, opting to hire Graham Revell, who scored films like 1994's The Crow and 2003's Daredevil, giving him just 2 weeks to complete the film's score. Now, when all was said and done, execs at Paramount decided not to screen the film early for critics, which angered so many of them and definitely added a lot to the negative reviews of the film. The film itself made $53 million on a budget of $63 million, making it an embarrassing flop for Paramount. Now, Peter Chung, the creator of the animated series, didn't like it either. He also wasn't asked to be a part of the film's production at all, which I believe was the first big misstep. He said the following of the film adaptation: "With apologies to both Phil and Matt, who have publicly been effusive in their praise for the show, the movie is a travesty. I was unhappy when I read the script 4 years ago. Seeing it projected larger than life in a crowded theater made me feel helpless. I know that the studio made a lot of cuts against the wishes of the writers and director. Most of the cuts concerned further development of the secondary characters. Since my main problems are with the portrayal of Aeon and Trevor, I doubt that I'd have liked the longer version much better." You know what, Peter? Talk your shit. You're valid. Like, this was your baby, and it was taken, adapted into something different, then edited and chopped into something unrecognizable. I get it. Director Karen Kasuma was placed in movie jail thereafter. Now, movie jail is an industry term to describe the period of time where a director, actor, or screenwriter isn't able to find work or funding for new projects following a significant critical or commercial flop. It's a form of a career or professional penalty box. Now, you can essentially escape movie jail by making a successful indie or low budget film to prove commercial viability once more. And I personally believe that this is bullshit, because more often than not, it's not fair. In Aeon's case and many other films' cases, unseen executives heavily tamper with the product, leading to the flops, and then the creatives are made to answer for it. They have to like walk around with a sort of scarlet letter on their careers until they leave the big machine of Hollywood, unnecessarily prove their worth and talent, to undo the bad association and restore big studios' faith, not in their talent, but in their financial viability. More often than not, when a movie is bad, it's not the fault of the director, screenwriter, or actors, it's executives. So I always try to remember this. Now, Kasuma eventually did leave movie jail when she was given the script for Jennifer's Body, a movie that would also not be a great experience, but for different reasons. Just as for Kara Kasuma, y'all, I wanted to take a moment to talk about why I like the film, the costume design. Hungarian costume designer Beatrix Aruna Pastor, known for My Own Private Idaho, Good Will Hunting, and the 1998 Psycho Shot for Shot remake, referenced high fashion designers for the look of Aeon Flux. Take, for example, this stair scene with Aeon just coming from a funeral. The funeral, by the way, was one of many scenes cut from the film. This look referenced 1998 Mugler. Everything Aeon had on was iconic. It was a far cry from the scantily clad cartoon version. It is very futuristic-y Star Trek. But this is supposed to take place in the distant future on Earth, and this is usually how that era is depicted on film. So personally, I don't have any qualms about this. Then there's the action. Now, I know the biggest complaint amongst Aeon fans is that this action feels formulaic and generic, and it is, but I'm not mad at it. I appreciate the athleticism and acrobatics that are being utilized with these fights. I definitely would have wanted to see Kasuma's original fight sequences though. And lastly, the locations. Now, while I would have loved to see this against the backdrop of modernist Brasilia, Germany worked just as well. These massive futuristic locations made Brynja feel like a real-life place from the distant future. The interiors felt as grand as the cartoon, albeit in a drastically different style than its predecessor, but a grand feeling nonetheless. And that's kind of why I still kind of enjoyed this film, right? Understanding for myself that this was to be the adaptation that was mostly missed for the fans of the cartoon. Now, I would have definitely loved to see Kasuma's version of Aeon in full, right? It wouldn't have been one-to-one with the cartoon, but I like to hope that it would have been an interesting adaptation or take on the character at least. There was a 2005 video game, which was an adaptation of the movie version of Aeon, also voiced by Charlize Theron. The game didn't follow the story of the series or the film, but it still included elements of both. Now, I didn't actually own the game, but I have seen gameplay that looks pretty good. Back in 2021, it was announced that there would be a live-action reboot television series for Aeon Flux on Paramount+. But since then, there have been no new updates or press releases. Now, with all these mergers and things, maybe that too was scrapped. Now, the adaptation from animation to film shows that attempts to expand the market for a text often compromises the very qualities that create its unique appeal, right? So for example, like the film keeps very surface, superficial elements of the original series, but offers a simplified narrative which waters down Aeon's edge.
The way she behaves in the moment is interesting. You can understand why he would be attracted to her because he had drugged the drink, and so she's daring him to take advantage of her. She's playing on his reluctance to score too easily. They're playing a game of he's trying to take advantage of her, and then she's trying to take advantage of him trying to take advantage of her. But it backfires because he doesn't actually want to take advantage of her when she's vulnerable. And it makes them interesting characters. So I don't have to explain why they would be attracted to each other. You understand that psychologically there's something going on there. In the live action one, they did a flashback, and I complained to them. There's nothing interesting in what either Aeon and Trevor are doing in the moment. They start kissing each other, and they have feelings for each other because, according to the backstory of the movie version, they previously had a relationship in a previous incarnation. They loved each other in a previous life, and that's why they love each other now. It gets you off the hook for having to make them interesting in the present.
Now, I personally think the only true way for Aeon Flux to come back would be in the form of its original animated series. To try and adapt it into any other medium or revive the animated series without creator Peter Chung would be a fool's errand. Aeon Flux doesn't belong in the mainstream. Its very design doesn't lend to mass appeal or mass consumption. It's niche, it's underground, It's punk. Now, in the words of the diva herself,
You can't give it, can't even buy it, and you just don't get it.
thank you so much for watching this episode of Queer Code. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.